So this class today is over Luther. A lot of ink has been spilled, especially in the 1970s, I think. That was when, I don't know when Erik Erikson wrote his book, Young Man Luther, but you know, he of course, Erikson was a psychoanalyst, so he analyzed things, even things that weren't there. We're kind of going through a kind of a reappraisal of Luther's development. Just so you know, a lot of people will be kind of bringing this up. They'll talk about his family life, and it's very funny to listen to people talk about Luther's upbringing. We'll kind of get to that. But it's a period of Luther that most people like to study. They really like to study the period just after what we'll be talking about, his early career, right up to about his mid-career. As he gets older, he becomes more cantankerous, more of these personality aspects that he's had all this time will kind of escalate. But up to this point, we're going to be going over a large portion of his life. And so we'll just go ahead and start out. So formative years, we're running generally, roughly 1483. The reason I say 1483 is because no one really knows. 1482 he sometimes listed, sometimes 1484. He was named Martin for Martin of Tours, whose saint day was on the 11th, but his mom had gone into labor or given birth the night before, so it was a very late pregnancy, so we're not even sure if he was born on the 10th or the 11th of November. But it was he said 1483, so we usually assume the 11th of November, 1483. Luther will be dealing with the Germany that Luther grew up in, the peoples and the community that he grew up in was very formative to his way of thinking. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about how Luther doesn't exist in isolation. A lot of times we like to present Luther as growing up in isolation, as being a reformer from isolation, as if Luther himself in this Herculean great man moment brought forth the Reformation. And certainly he was the catalyst, but as we said before, he's more of a marker. He's more of a person who's willing to kind of cross that bridge and move forward, rather than someone who ushered in this period. Luther's upbringing, his immediate family, and Luther's vocation. So this is the Holy Roman Empire during the time of Luther. The picture is from a book, Germany Memories of a Nation, which is a very good book. But anyway, you can kind of see anybody really quickly able to pick out where Luther lived. Exactly. These are all the small principalities. The Holy Roman Federation around 1500, so more or less when Luther was around. Now I know a lot of people are straining their eyes, so that's where we're going. Luther's going to stay around this area for most of his life. The thing you need to remember at this time, the German tribes are fragmented, and they're fragmented all over this area, which is not just Germany, you'll notice. Areas like Königsberg are in Russia now. This is Poland. Bohemia becomes the Czech Republic. Austria's down there. Here are the lowlands, Netherlands, and Belgium. I feel like a weather reporter here. But you notice that all of these things, we don't see the modern borders here. So Luther's Germany. Germany is a patchwork of small principalities. And there's a reason for this, several reasons actually. Three main reasons. Germany seems to be doing okay with the decentralized authority. You have groups like the Hanseatic League who are doing trading, their businesses. They don't, as long as they pay the right people, go through the right tariffs, they don't really mind. Everyone's making a profit, so there's no need for having a centralized authority. They can't agree who is going to become the monarch. Now, there are a group of nobles called the electors. Some of them are bishops, some of them are secular princes, but they will elect the emperor, but it's not quite like what we think. At this time, the monarchy is just starting to develop. National monarchies are just now really starting to develop. They're farthest along in areas like England, but England is way out on the frontier. England does not have the kind of massive people groups that other places in Europe do. The other strong national monarchy is France, and they're just now starting to develop. In fact, they're not really that far along. So Germany isn't really far behind too many other places. But nevertheless, the Germans can't agree on an overarching monarchy. I mean, would you with that patchwork? Who is going to be the person who's going to do that? It won't be until the mid-19th century that Germany will unify finally. The Pope and the rest of Europe don't want to unite Germany either. So no one really wants it united. The Pope doesn't want it because then you have this countervailing force. The Pope has already run into problems with monarchs who get too powerful. Remember the Babylonian captivity? There are other incidents with a lot of different emperors and so forth, kind of trying to coerce the Pope. So as long as you can keep them fragmented, it's easier to get what you want from them. Now, Luther comes from the area of Saxony, I knew I was going to, Saxe-Anhalt. And this region, is more noted not by what we think of as national boundaries, or boundaries per se, but as a people group. The Saxons considered themselves in one tribe. By 1356, the Duke of Saxe-Wittenberg is elevated to that of an elector. Again, these are nobles who were selected to elect the emperor. By the time of Luther, the Wettenlands, which was a particular branch of Saxon rulers, the Wettenlands have split into two sections, the two sons of Frederick II. Now what's interesting is the Saxons are going to start off in the, I've got to do this backwards, they're going to start off in the north of Germany, western part of Germany, and they are going to migrate down until they get to the east central part of what we consider Germany. And so the land that he has now has just been separated between these two sons, Albert and Ernest. You're going to want to remember these. It seems silly to have to remember these two, but these two branches of Saxony are going to be vying for power. And the Protestant Reformation is going to be a way for both of them to kind of leverage power against one another. So there are two branches of this. Luther goes into one branch, or his family lives in one branch. Now, Luther's parents. The Lindemann family is a wealthy, well-off family, but they move to the area from Neustadt up until they get to, they move from there up to Eisenach, and then she will move to Eisleben. So they go, the family moves up into this area. Why? Well, the area is becoming very well off. Mining is taking off. Silver mining, for instance, in Germany is accelerating at this point, and this area of Germany is producing some more silver than just about anywhere else in Europe. Her family is a mining family, and that's actually how she meets her husband. She's very tough. She comes from an upper middle class family, but Luther doesn't say too much about her, and that's fairly normal for people in his age. His father, Hans, is the oldest son, and we would think he would inherit the family farm. But Thuringian law, Hans is from Thuringia, which is another region of Germany. Thuringian law states that the youngest son inherits the property. It makes sense. Makes about as much sense, if not more sense, than giving it to the oldest son. The youngest son's going to live longer, probably. So the oldest son has to go and make his way in the world. And Hans ends up going into the mining industry. Now, he probably doesn't work himself up from just a regular miner. He's probably already working his way up from foreman, and he will eventually move into the top tiers. He will control several mines. And this allows him to move from the peasant class into the middle class. Now, remember what we said last week, how there was a growth, an explosion of the middle class happening right around this time. And the middle class is booming, especially after the ravages of the Black Plague. Now there's capital being invested, there's money to be made, and he's able to move up the social ladder. Well, what do you do when you move up the social ladder? You try and stay at the rung you're at. And the best way to stay at the rung you're at is to make sure that your family is situated in a good place. He wants to secure their places. But his fate will ultimately rise and fall with the mining industry. With capital control, at this time capitalism is just being born. It's the capitalism we were talking about earlier isn't the same kind of capitalism of the investment system that is starting to emerge, as major banking houses are beginning to come online after the Middle Ages. So in the Middle Ages, the major areas where you could secure loans were through the church, but now private firms are securing wealth. And the thing is, this is mysterious to people who are simply workers. And so he can't understand why the money is going to everyone else but himself. See, it's not just the middle management who has to get paid. The workers have to get paid. And the people who are funding this, they have to get paid as well. And on top of that, the noble lords in the area are extracting money and wealth from things going on their land. So there are all of these people that want money, and it's hard, but they're making do and will make do unless a new form or a new supply of silver and so forth comes in. And right around this time is the discovery of the New World, which means the bottom is falling out on a lot of these material goods because new supplies are opening up. And so while Hans maintains a degree of wealth early on, he eventually has to sell his shares to the capitalists, but this will be years later, long after Luther has made a name for himself as a reformer. At this time and early on, Luther's father will be well off and will provide for Luther. Luther is born in Eisleben in the 1480s. Now, early on they moved to Mansfeld. This is a picture, different pictures of Eisleben here. And this is a picture of Mansfeld. The town no longer exists. Once the mining collapsed, everyone left the town. So, anyway, they move early on to Mansfeld. Luther, though, will return back to Eisenach to do early education studies. He lives there with a relation of his mother in a house. He enjoyed his time there, but he doesn't really write about it. He considers himself very much to be from Eisleben. The reason why is because Luther has a deep connection to that community. Eisleben is a town that Luther's will identify with his whole life. Indeed, it's one of those rare quirks of fate. Luther dies in the same town that he is born in. He dies there because he has maintained relations with the noble lords there, and because he had studied law, they ask him to be a lawyer. He goes, he's too sick, he dies. We'll talk about that later. But his subsequent law training keeps him on as a retainer there. Anyway, Eisleben defines him. When he is older, he will say, I'm a child of Eisleben. I am the son of a farmer, even though his father wasn't a farmer. He considers himself that because his family came from farming stock. He has deep roots with his community. And these deep roots kind of motivate him forward as he's going on. There's a picture here. This is in Wittenberg, isn't it? Or is this, what is this, Amy?
I think it's Eisleben.
Yeah, I think it is too. That the steeple there reminds me of the church over in Wittenberg, but yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely not one.
It's Eisleben, especially since these were organized in the files. But I was scared there for a second. I was like, wait, did I get those mixed up? Statue of Luther here in erected. Oh, now I remember this place. Yeah, you remember this. Kevin and Vanette were there with us. Yeah. Yeah. So this is in Eisleben. They erected a statue. It's very interesting. Eisleben. Eisleben was behind the Iron Curtain, and so when all of the Lutherans were going to descend on there, they quickly rediscovered their Lutheran history and did what any good capitalists do. They set up a lot of museums there for us Lutherans who would come and visit.
Do you know who the statue was?
Luther.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no.
That looks familiar.
No, we didn't go there.
This is the other church in the area. This one apparently was where Bach spent some time. So that's the outside of the church where Luther was baptized. So we went in there. And there's my dad next to a baptismal font. And this is baptismal font from the area. Yeah. So we're all just, yeah, he's the guy in the green shirt. So and then this was interesting. These are the mine shafts that they would work in. Very claustrophobic environment. This is before the inventions a lot of inventions that we take for granted, even up to the Industrial Revolution. Mining was difficult work. You didn't know, just like you don't know today. It's dangerous, dangerous work. And anything could happen. Luther's father probably wasn't a miner. He was probably, like I said, a middle manager somewhere above the heads of the gangs, but below the owners. Eventually he would own some mines outright, but he would not be going down there. Very dangerous work, very rough people, not much, you don't go into mining work if you have a bright future ahead in some other area here. And this is Amy here. This is in that house in, I'm going to say Eisenach,
I think so.
where Luther would have stayed. I get Eisenach and Eisleben so easily mixed up. It's just very difficult for me to remember exactly each one, even ignoring the fact that their names are so similar.
How far are they?
Not far. I want to say 40 miles, maybe at most. I think it was like a 2-day walk. Erfurt's 40 miles.
Yeah.
Luther will continue his studies in Erfurt, which is not too far away from there. It is the largest city in Thuringia. About this time it has 19,000, maybe 20,000 people. It was first mentioned in the 8th century. It was founded as an outpost. It's the ford of several rivers, and it was kind of supposed to be a beachhead for missions into the area, set up as a diocesan center. So it's a very important city. It's very important. The trade routes are important. The religious communities are very important. And it's a major hub. So a college was set up there in 1379, one of these newfangled things that were sweeping all over Europe, the medieval college. At this time, there would have only been a handful of colleges all over. And like many colleges today, some of them were for high prestige, others of them were for training the middle class. Luther going to Erfurt was good, but it was definitely one of the latter categories of colleges. And this is a quote by Scott Hendricks. This town is so important. It's so important for them to have this college. Colleges are a major form of revenue, even today. I remember when I was going to school, I went to a school that was Methodist, had a Methodist background. And I remember one of the history professors saying, it's kind of odd. There's this Methodist school in an area that's mostly Presbyterian and Baptist. Why are they having these Methodists, these hated Methodists, set up a school? And it's because if you know anything, you're going to have revenue come in. And so they went along with what the Methodists, the Methodists wanted to be a dry school, dry county, and so the county switched over to being a dry county in order to accommodate this school. That just happened, with my school, which was founded in the 1800s. The same thing goes on here. They want to have the school. It's a revenue maker. It also gives them a place on the map, a name for themselves. So Erfurt is really part of this college building boom that happens in the late Middle Ages, Renaissance, and Reformation period. Luther will continue his studies in Erfurt. He will go there in 1501 to study law, gets a Bachelor's of Arts in 1502 and a Master's in 1505. Erfurt it's a top-level school. The humanist revolution in scholarship is displacing the medieval. What that means is medieval scholastic research had, which dealt with a lot of things we associate with the Middle Ages. But by the Renaissance, things are coming in, the rediscovery, the going back to the source ad fontes is coming along as well. And all of these things are occurring at the university. What's interesting about Erfurt is because of its size, it is top tier, but it's also geared more for training. Because of its size, it's wrestling with the old way of thinking and the new way of thinking a lot more than a college that is only focused on its prestige or holding to certain grand poobahs who may want this or that to be taught. So Luther is aware of all of these changes. This is important for us to remember. Luther is not, we think of Luther as almost being this monk who is retreated from life, but he's been exposed to the big thoughts that are going on in his day and age. And this is really important for us to remember inside the church as well. A lot of people I know have the temptation to retreat when the world is asking all of these questions. Luther, instead of retreating, ends up having to face them head on. And he is exposed to the best thinking, the most novel thinking that is going on in his age. This is not some preacher from some backwater who has not read the classics. This is someone who has been immersed in the learning of his age. Luther's faculty mixes very interestingly in this way.
What's humanist then?
We talked a little bit about humanism last week. Humanism is not what we think of when we think of humanists today. The humanists sought it's a very broad category. It's a very broad category. But the humanists sought to look out for the human welfare. And so it's more contrasted with a lot of the things that were going on in the Middle Ages, which were looking out for different things' welfare rather than human beings' welfare. It sought to focus on less on what sought to put the focus back on humanity, which meant that government wasn't defined by tradition, it wasn't defined by what we can get away with, it wasn't defined by battle, but what causes a lot of human flourishing. It sought to see less, going through the Bible and not asking questions, and rather asking, what is God's plan for humanity? And so the thing was that the humanists said the medieval church has been kind of coasting on autopilot all these years, because whenever you ask them about things, they always say, well, that's always the way it's been done. And there was no purpose to what is being done. So the humanists sought to ask questions. And this is really important for us to remember, because all good philosophical movements are not about the answers they give, but rather the questions they raise. So in our current age, we get a lot of confusion about postmodernism. But what postmodernism is about asking the questions, what got us into the messes of World War I, World War II, and the Russian Revolution, and how can we avoid those problems in the future? The same thing's true with the humanist question. The problem comes when people shift from asking questions to giving answers. And that's when things get stuck. Middle Ages asked a bunch of questions how is society supposed to exist now that we're no longer pagan, but we're Christian? And so ideas of scholasticism, going to the Bible, reading the Bible, taking the Bible as the centerpiece, and the traditions of the various tribes that had formed on the borders of Rome, and then were forming within the borders of Rome, those became kind of the basis of scholasticism as it migrated from asking questions to giving dogmatic answers unthinkingly. And so humanism is asking all of these questions, and it seeks to go back. The main rallying cry is ad fontes, which is Latin for back to the fountain, back to the source, the spring. And what they're doing is they're going back to the source. This will be in Roman law, Roman history, because a lot of them have adopted that. If they were barbarians, if they were a Germanic people, they didn't have a written language. The Latin and the Latin history was the only language they knew. So they would be going back to those sources because those are the only sources they had. Unless they were going back to the sources of the people, those were looked down on. It gets complicated. But let me just put it this way. For people also, we can see how this would shift over into dealing with the Bible. Because at this time, we've already talked about Erasmus last week, and we talked about Cisneros in Spain, and other people, Wycliffe, who are trying to go back to the source of the Bible and bring that to the everyday problems of people's lives. And so that roughly, generally, is what humanism is today, or was then. Humanism today has been co-opted like so many other words, and it just doesn't mean what it originally meant. In fact, Luther will be steeped in humanism, but Philip Melanchthon, his lieutenant, his second in command, is considered he's considered by some to be the second greatest humanist of his age after Erasmus, which is high praise, but I think that isn't applicable. I think Melanchthon is a far better scholar than even Erasmus was. So, but those are the kind of arguments that get you published, and not the kind of arguments that are good for presenting to people. So, anyway, Luther's faculty is an interesting mix as the old meets the new, as the old scholasticism, which focuses on these kinds of nuanced questions, Aristotelian being Aristotle focused, and as they kind of wrestle with these two competing new viewpoints coming up. These are pictures here taken in Erfurt, and I think we all kind of agreed on the trip. Erfurt was one of our favorite cities to visit. It was just really pretty. It was nicely done. The layout was nice. They kept the city looking good, but they, a lot of stuff from the old city, but they really made sure it looked nice. So that's what's going on, but there's Erfurt at this time is a bustling, vibrant city. Academic trade is going well. There are a lot of religious houses here in Erfurt, and so all of this this cosmopolitan town, maybe not as cosmopolitan as other cities in Europe, but certainly cosmopolitan enough. Just think of a smaller state in the United States and maybe their metro city, and that kind of gets you an idea of what's going on in Erfurt. This kind of gets to what Howard was asking about. Luther's Reformation, humanism is definitely playing a part. Luther, if he's translating the Bible, if he's asking these questions about individuals and their salvation, those are humanist questions. So the humanist training that he gained when he was taking basic level courses and would continue on as he got his philosophy degree, those are all playing a part. Relationships, George Spalatin was there at 1499, just a few years before Luther was. Spalatin he comes from a town in Bavaria, and he goes into law and ends up working as a tutor to the noble Frederick the Wise's, one of the people in Frederick the Wise's family. Spalatin was placed very well in Frederick the Wise's, who was Luther's patron, his family and his household. And Spalatin has the ear, and oftentimes many people believe that it was Spalatin who was the go-between between Luther and Frederick the Wise. We don't have any records that Luther or Frederick the Wise ever had any interactions. We like to imagine they probably did, but they may not have. Spalatin was the go-between, and he was also, that was kind of nice because he was able to keep Frederick the Wise's hands clean. Spalatin was smart. He was adept at maneuvering politically. He was adept at all the things you would kind of want in someone, in this kind of lawyer. And he was able to give Frederick the Wise deniability, which meant that Frederick the Wise had a freer hand to protect Luther, but also to make alliances for the new Lutherans that were going to come about. So it's very nice that he met him there. Also, Justice Jonas was met there. Justice was also an early reformer. Now, one thing we should know is these relationships. Again, when we think Luther, we think Lutheran, or we think, Lutherans, all we ever believe is everything that Martin Luther spouted to us. In fact, the term Lutheran was a derogatory term against Protestants from the Wittenberg Reformation. Oh, you don't believe in the church, you don't believe in Jesus, you follow Luther. And so the thing was, Luther, even though he was the most outspoken person and he could write very well, he relied on other people. Now, while he was at Erfurt, the reason for his going to Erfurt was to become a lawyer. And this, again, deals with the problems that we've kind of inherited in the Luther studies. We're kind of uncovering things. So what we had believed a lot of times was that Luther's father, being a minor, we had a stereotypical view of him, and that he was demanding, he was mean, and Luther rebelled against the church because he was angry at his own father figure. That is not something that he may have been, but we can't postulate that from the evidence. Luther had a very good relationship with his father. And the reason why his father wanted him to go into law is the same reason a lot of people want their children to go into law. I remember my dad talking about, my dad's from Columbus, Ohio, and they used to drive every time by the law school, the Moritz Law School over there at Ohio State. And he said every time, my dad would say, "There's the law school, Mark." So that's something that happens even today. And again, another thing that happens even today is your parents want you to go to law and you end up going in the ministry, like my father too. But Luther goes into this trying not so much to please his father, but to maintain the family. What do we mean by this? Well, Lindell Roper very insightfully notices that Hans is seeing the way to get ahead is to maintain the fortune that you've accrued. It's not like in the old days where someone who's noble just maintains their wealth forever and ever. you need to find a way to maintain it. And the best way to maintain that is through contracts. And the best way to get contracts is through how? Law. And if you've got a lawyer you know and trust, it's good. And nothing's better than having your son as a lawyer. In fact, Luther had a friend whose name escapes me right now, and I'll mention it next week when I finally remember. But Luther had a friend who came from a wealthier family and who would do that track, go in that track, and the family did maintain their wealth. So Luther's father is concerned not with himself per se, but the family. The family maintaining wealth and continuing on, especially in uncertain times. And everything falls short. Now remember, Luther's father is paying for this education. This is a lot of money. Paying for education still is a lot of money, but it's a lot of money back then. And Luther's father is not expecting a dividend of his son kind of paying for it, but rather he is investing in his family's future as he always has. And now Luther will bring about this great disappointment when he finally abandons it. But that's coming up. So here's some pictures.
It's really colorful, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
I love all the flowers.
Yeah, this is a bridge here. This is, you remember that was the, we went over here, we're on the other side. These are some people on our trip. They were from Malaysia, I believe. But we, yeah, over here the river flows, and of course people build houses on these bridges. But this is down some little back alley, and then you go over and there was a restaurant over there. Really
An ice
pretty.
cream place.
Well, so there's some other places here. This is the other side. So this going as we go in here, this is the other side from that bridge that we saw. And so this road is kind of normal, and then this one's a bridge. This one leads up to a bridge and all these buildings.
Are some of the roads real narrow?
All of the roads are really narrow until you get out of the autobahns. But
Are they one-way roads?
well, these are all pedestrian.
Oh, but just the-
Oh, I think they're very limited traffic. A lot of Europeans have very limited traffic because the shopping centers are so close to where people live, so they just walk places.
Is that your dad in the green sweater?
Yeah,
Oh, there's me.
there we go.
Look at me.
Yay, ice cream.
So, full confession, I can't eat ice cream anymore, much to my chagrin. You can see there are two ne'er-do-wells getting ice cream right there. But anyway, and my father ahead of them, who's the biggest ne'er-do-well. But I can't eat ice cream, so I asked Amy, I said, what ice cream do you want? And so she was able to get two of them. It was very nice. The tour guide, whether or not she probably reimbursed, but she paid for us to get ice cream. She says the best ice cream shop. I can't tell, was it?
It's pretty good.
It was pretty good.
You have to ask him what he had.
What did you have, by the way?
The whiskey walnut.
Oh, the whiskey walnut. What about you? Do you remember?
Why don't you tell him what I have given? Do you remember?
No, I just know I had whiskey walnut.
Amy, which ones did you get?
One of them was a chestnut nougat,
Uh,
and the other one was kind of a like spicy chocolate.
yeah, they had a lot of,
Several towns.
and those were just a few of them. There were probably about 20 or 40 different flavors that you could get, and they were all really just delightful, and I was very angry with everyone.
Well, it looked like you were gonna get an empty cone.
No.
One of them was his and he didn't get it.
So Amy told me that was very good, and I got points from with my wife, and anytime that happens, that's good in my book. But that was one of the highlights of Erfurt.
Go.
We're in Erfurt. Erfurt was the place that Luther studied for university on his way back home, visiting his parents, got caught in a lightning storm, and he ended up going to the Augustinian monastery, which will be seen a little bit later on. Erfurt's a pretty city. We are really enjoying being here. We're going to get back to our group now. All right.
I didn't even recognize you.
So Luther obviously has a monastic turn. This is recorded in Table Talk here, 16th. So this is really our mention of him getting caught in the lightning storm. A lightning storm happens in around 1511 or so. 15. It happens many years before this, many decades before this. And the thing to remember here is he's recalling this. So a lot of these reminiscences, we ask questions, did he really get caught in a lightning storm? Now, it probably did happen. And the thing about it is, it was written down later on by chroniclers who like it because it's a good story. We all remember about Luther getting caught in a lightning storm and just having this flash of desire. But the thing is, why would you keep an oath made in the spur of the moment? And so chroniclers said, well, it just shows what a trustworthy person he was. He believed that, in his oath. Luther would later say he made the oath under duress, and so he considered his monastic vows to be invalid because of that. But the thing to remember is there's something building in Luther. And I think the tipping point might have been that storm, but the bigger storm was the one going on inside Luther. All right, you can see Amy's there in the red and charcoal. So he gets caught in this lightning storm, but Luther's change is more gradual. 2 months into studying law, Luther will join the Augustinian order. He can't do it anymore. He can't go along. And what could have caused the change? Well, one chronicler says, or one biographer, I think, puts it best. Luther always learned existentially. Existentially just means from his own existence. So we are always told about how John Calvin was a lawyer. And anyone who's read John Calvin's work knows that he's a lawyer. He is trying to make sure that God has a good legal contract on people. Luther will also be a lawyer, but he approaches law and then eventually his monastic vows completely differently. He approaches them from the what is going on inside me. It's personal for Luther. This is something that has always frustrated me whenever I've read biographies, because it's like they don't seem to understand that Luther means what he says. He really does worry about his immortal soul. And people this day and age, we're so flippant, we kind of write that off. But anyone who's kind of contemplated and taken a serious appraisal of your own life realizes that you don't measure up to what God wants. At this time, the church is portraying God as a judge, and they are the only ones who are going to be able to protect you from a vengeful, judgmental God. It's not the Catholic Church's fault. Again, they just kind of walked down this road without thinking, without asking questions. They had so many answers that eventually they stopped asking questions. And so Luther is frustrated in his soul. He can't be made right with God. How can the things that I'm doing for the church justify me before God, when the things that I do are so small and the sins I've created are so great? What is going to justify me? And he does not have a resolution for that problem. And so he does the only thing he knows how to do, which is he goes into a monastery. Because those are like batteries for earning salvation for the community. All right. It's also national. His people, not, I say national because, again, nation borders don't exist at that time. But his people, different German principalities, they all have a kind of a collective understanding, and they feel like they're being put upon by the rest of Europe, and especially by the papacy. And so he's under this immense pressure. He's a person who takes everything very seriously, extremely seriously. And so when he takes it seriously, he has to do the only thing that might be able to save him, which is he goes into a monastery. Luther has religious desires for that reason. Now I was going into the monastery here. Here we are inside, walking around in the monastery. Why did he go to this particular monastery? Well, the Augustinians had a reputation of being very strict in their observances. Luther did not want any backsliding. He wanted to make sure he was right with God. And so he goes to the strictest place because he knows that they will be able to focus him best on God. In fact, he had a confessor, Staupitz, and Staupitz was very interesting. Staupitz, he once confessed to Staupitz, and Staupitz was so frustrated, he said, stop bothering me with these puppy dog sins. Stop bothering me with these little sins that don't matter at all. You know, come to me when you've done a really heinous deed. But for Luther, every small sin, every infraction was a heinous deed. Luther's monastic life was centered around the notion that he had his own sin. He is sent to Rome in 1510. He is going to clear up some disputes and offer things to Rome. He goes to Rome. Later on, he would show that he is disillusioned. This will be seen, you know, we can see this kind of in the national problems that are facing Germans. They feel put upon by Rome. But he is going there, and he realizes that these people, this holy place, he's done everything, and he doesn't feel like he's any less of a sinner. He doesn't feel any more saved after coming back from Rome. He has done the thing that is supposed to give him salvation, and he does not feel saved. And it's a problem. It's a crisis for him. He's facing what the Germans call, I cannot pronounce it, but this German word that means, you know, this crisis in your soul, this separation, the depression, you know, German. And he's feeling this way.
Because he saw, but he saw so much sin going on down there in Rome.
There was that too, but the main thing he's focused on is his own sinfulness, and when he goes to Rome, he's disappointed because they're just as sinful, if not more so than he is. They're not taking it seriously. He is a serious person, and they're not taking it seriously. He doesn't know what to do, and he thought this would be the place, and it's not. So Luther is given many things to do, and he writes about this. He talks about these are just a list from Luther's own hands of all the stuff that he's doing. He's preaching, he's caretaking, he's doing all the monastic vows, he's even teaching a little bit, and he's writing. My goodness, is he writing. He's finding out that he's a fantastic writer. He has an aptitude to write and write and write. And all of these things were given to him by Staupitz to get his mind off his sinfulness, to get his mind and clarify his mind. And people are like, "Oh, Luther, if we just had medication in that day, he'd be fine." But the thing is, Luther finally does get release, which we'll get to next week. But he finally gets release from these problems through his faith. But at the time, none of the distractions are solving the problem. Oops. And that's it. So, Let's go ahead and pray. Lord, we want to thank you for the church and for all the people who reform the church and keep it going. Lord, we ask that you use us in our own time to witness to you, not angrily, but with your loving gospel message. Bring us closer to you and closer to one another. Amen.
Thanks for the cookies.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Good job, Bill. Thank you.
3 months.